everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic back once again, and it's time to talk about what happened at New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom 17. Night 1, but it felt like a main, but there is going to be a night 2. It's time to talk about what happened. Quite a bit of pre-show action to talk about, but we're not going to dwell on it for too long. We had Ryohei Oiwa and Oleg Boltin in a 3-minute exhibition match, which went to a time limit draw to kick off the show. The next match on the pre-show was the traditional New Japan Rumble, which was a bit different this year. There wasn't just one winner. There were 4 winners, with the final 4 all battling at a later date to determine the King of Pro Wrestling for 2023, or the initial one for the year. No major surprises in the Rumble, unfortunately, just kind of guys who weren't on the main card. You had some big names in there as well, Shingo, Ishii, those sort of guys. But the final 4 were the Great Okan, Sho, Shingo Takagi, and who was the 4th one? Oh my goodness me. Oh, it was Toru Yano. They'd all face off later on for the King of Pro Wrestling title, but it looked as he was leaving like Great Okan just decided to steal the physical belt anyway, so good for him. He is, of course, the Rev Pro champion at the minute as well. Maybe it was that belt, but I think it was blue. I think it was the King of Pro Wrestling belt, so he's a naughty boy. Then we had kind of a weird pre-show but not pre-show interim match, kind of between the main card and the pre-show. It was a strange one, but it was an important one as well, because it was, of course, the Antonio Inoki Memorial match. This was the team of the legendary Tatsumi Fujinami, Tiger Mask, and Minoru Suzuki taking on the trio of Nagata, Kojima, and Makabe. Loads of dads in this one, so the action wasn't like that fast or furious, but it was passionate. It was quite intense. Fujinami impressed me. I think he's like 69 years old. He was doing a dragon screw leg whips and everything. He looked, for his age, he looked in okay shape, although obviously he's had a long and like hellacious career, but he was doing absolutely fine. I thought his team were going to get the win, and then Togi Makabe just kind of fell on Tiger Mask for the flash pinfall, and I was like, oh man, I wish Fujinami's team had won, you know, in the Inoki Memorial match. Anyway, Fujinami cut a nice promo afterwards regardless, praising Inoki and saying, right, let's all have a great show. Okay, here we go, on to the main show. We started the show with some junior tag team action. The champions defending their tag belts, that's TJP and Francesco Akira, taking on Lio Rush and Yoh. Kind of a relatively new team, but they won that tournament to get this title shot. And I think the story and the build to this one was that their friendship, their new friendship, is powering them up. It's pulling them through. So they lost. And they lost as well because the champions' tactics were to isolate Lio Rush. They got him on the ramp and hit almost a 3D into an X Factor, and that busted him open, I believe, like legitimately. There were high spots all over the place in this one, quite dangerous high-risk moves as well, like a big Tower of Doom sort of superplex thing at one point. And I think it followed the mold of like an exciting opening match to get the crowd hyped. But the finish was a bit of a surprise for me, with TJP just scoring a quick roll-up and getting the win. The heels retained the belts to open the show, and I could have sworn we'd get a big babyface crowd-popping victory, but that's not the way it went. Next up, a match, right. So often Wrestle Kingdom in the past has been criticised for even the undercard taking up so much time that by the time you get to the main event, everything's just a drag. This show did not fall into that trap, but I think it might have even gone too far the other way, with certain undercard matches not getting enough of a spotlight. Now with that in mind, we get to the IWGP Women's Championship match. This was Kairi, formerly known as Kairi Sane in WWE, formerly known as Kairi Hojo, of course, in Stardom, defending that newly created IWGP Women's Championship against the challenger, Tam Nakano. And this match followed the framework of like Kairi not being the heel, but certainly being the more experienced, certainly being the favourite against Tam, very much the underdog. Although when Tam was firing up, it was very, very exciting indeed. At one point she hit a terrifying delayed vertical drop brainbuster kind of thing. Kairi, of course, fought back with the Cutlass, which is her like spinning back fist, multiple of those, and her big elbow drop, still the best in the business at that move for the win. Quite predictably, I think, retaining her championship, but in like literally 5 minutes, I really thought this should have either been higher on the card or given way more time regardless of where it was. And then, of course, we had the moment that many of us were tuning in primarily to see, which was the debut of not Sasha Banks anymore, but Mercedes Mone. She came out looking like a star, to be honest. The hair dye thing was magnificent. I don't know how if you didn't see it, it was like 3 different colors all the way around. I don't know. Do you see that? Anyway, she got in the ring, went for a handshake with Kairi, and then hit her with a move. Now, we've seen Sasha, or Mercedes, practicing this on Twitter in Mexico. I believe there was training footage of her, like, having her opponent in a backpack position, swinging them round into a DDT. That's kind of what she did here, but it didn't really look that clean, at least from the camera angle we saw. She then cut a promo emphasizing that she is not the boss, but the CEO, and challenging Kairi for that belt. Kind of what we thought would happen with the challenge being issued, but here she's clearly the heel, which I think is interesting. I think that Mercedes is always better as a heel. Unfortunately, weirdly, the crowd weren't that excited. There was a bit of like a whoa, but it wasn't what you'd maybe expect. She also said her catchphrase, by the way, as well, which is "you can bank on Mone." All the money puns. I think that this wasn't presented as big a deal as it should have been, and I think that New Japan should maybe have realised that on a global scale, this is what the world was talking about, and that maybe they should have given her, and the match itself, more of a featured spot on the card. At least in my opinion anyway. Unfortunately, it didn't go off that cleanly. The move was a bit weird. The promo was really dumbed down. Obviously, Sasha, or Mercedes, wasn't going to go in too much and like an intricate promo about her motives and everything, because it's primarily in front of a Japanese audience, and I understand that. But at the same time, they should have made this a bigger deal, in my opinion. Regardless, I'm still very much looking forward to the match if it gets the time, and that's going to be in, I think, the Battle in the Valley in San Jose pretty shortly. I think that's next month, possibly. The next match, another couple of Western stars, this time FTR defending the IWGP Tag Team titles against the Chaos Faction team of Hirooki Goto and Yoshi-Hashi. Good old babyface boys. This one was a real sprint, this match. Again, it didn't get as much time as you might expect for a Wrestle Kingdom match, but it was at least like 100 miles an hour. Cash Wheeler with a big dive to the outside. FTR stepping slightly out of, not their comfort zone, because they're good at pretty much everything, but certainly out of their normal framework, I suppose. There was also one of those terrifying vertical suplex spots to the outside where they both tumble over. I can't believe nothing went wrong with the guardrail that close to the apron in the Tokyo Dome. But ultimately, it was Dax who was isolated and picked up the loss, essentially. Lost the belt for his team as well. I think that's all of FTR's belts that they won last year now out of their hands. They've lost them all. Are they possibly going back to WWE? This certainly feeds into the rumours, I guess. Also, I feel like they did this at WrestleMania one year when they lost to Hawkins and Ryder as well, lost the tag belts then, and they very blatantly kissed the belts goodbye before the opening bell. They did that here as well, like kissing the belts loads and then blowing kisses to the crowd over the belts. I was like, these guys are losing and they're not making any secret of it. But Goto and Yoshi-Hashi, worthy champions, of course, worthy winners, and the crowd still love them, even though they've been around for, maybe because they've been around for so long. Next up, Zack Sabre Jr. facing that young lion who could. He's no young lion no more. He's been racking up the wins. Ren Narita in the tournament final to crown the inaugural TV champion. I thought the theme of this match was going to be submission exchanges, but instead the theme of the match was kicks. Lots of kicks. Kicks to the chest, kicks to the back. They did that thing where one sits down cross-legged and goes, you kick me in the back, bang, and then the other one goes, right, now you kick me, and bang, and oh, looked sore. But then it settled down into a bit more of a technical match for a while. Both men are great at this style, of course, especially Zack Sabre Jr., one of the finest technical wrestlers in all of the land. But Ren Narita at one point went for his, so if you don't know Ren Narita, one of his signature moves, and it's impressive, is an overhead belly to belly. He gets like an insane arch on it and everything. It looks amazing. Zack avoided it. I don't think he hit it once in the match, which kind of protects the move, but I just wanted to see that belly to belly, you know? Then we got a bit of an exchange of submissions, and then out of nowhere, a flash win. Zack clamping on a submission. Oh, an immediate tap out, which makes the submission look really deadly, like I have to tap out now, or a limb's getting torn off. I understand that. But again, maybe could have been a shade longer. On the other hand, I will say that flash submissions kind of do keep the art of submissions strong, and it keeps you paying attention at all times, especially in a match featuring two technical specialists like Ren and Zack Sabre Jr. So yeah, I liked it for what it was. I maybe would have liked to have seen Ren win. At the same time, Zack's not had that many. Has he ever won a belt in New Japan? I think our Twitch chat was saying that he hadn't, but I remember him holding a belt. Maybe that was a Rev Pro belt. I'm glad Zack won then. It's coming home. It came home. England. After the match, we had interesting developments as the Mighty Don't Kneel hit the ring and presented Zack with a The Mighty Don't Kneel t-shirt, which he then teased throwing away before putting on, and kind of, it seemed like, assumed his role as leader of their group, and they were all smiles and everything, in a bit of a heelish way, it has to be said. This works for Zack, I suppose, if you're giving him a group, because Suzuki Gun has now dissolved and he's got no allies around him, and now that he's the leader of a stable, it makes him seem more dangerous and important, so good booking there, I think. Next up, Carl Anderson versus Tama Tonga. The WWE contracted Carl Anderson on a card with New Japan and even some AEW wrestlers as well. Very unique, very weird position. Obviously, he was facing Tama Tonga for Anderson's Never Openweight Championship. I like this match for what it was. It felt different in the card. The theme of it was Anderson being fully a heel, blasting Tama with the belt before the bell, throwing him onto the ramp, hitting him with all kinds of nasty moves, and just taking him totally out of contention before the match had even begun. It was a bit more sports entertaining than we're used to in a New Japan show perhaps, but it certainly worked and stood out as unique on the card. The story of the match essentially was, of course, Tama Tonga fighting back into things, both men looking for the gun stun as well, which they both like to use, and both reversing it and countering it and getting out of that move left, right and centre, but with Tama still very much weakened from that pre-match attack. So eventually when he fought back and ripped off the top half of his attire and the crowd came alive for him, I was like, God, it's weird to say, but the bad boy Tama Tonga is now a full babyface. Mr. Bullet Club is now a good guy in the eyes of the Japanese fans. Still weird to get used to, and when he made his entrance, he wasn't doing any of his cool entrance stuff. He was just all business. It's going to take some getting used to, even though he's been doing it for a while, but this is kind of the most high-profile match I've seen him do it in, given the circumstance with Anderson and everything. And ultimately, it was Tama who won as well, finally nailing that gun stun, getting the win. The final gun stun didn't connect that well, I've got to say. I don't know which fault, it was good enough, it was fine. And Tama Tonga is the new Never Openweight Champion. The right result, kind of a nice story with Tama getting revenge on Carl Anderson, both two original Bullet Club dudes, but Tama's no longer in the group and everything. I liked it for what it was, which is still not used to seeing my guy being a babyface, but I liked it though. Next up, another match laden with history. Keiji Muto's final match in New Japan Pro Wrestling, teaming with Hiroshi Tanahashi and Shota Umino. Kind of a past, present and future thing going on with that team, taking on Los Ingobernables de Japón. I can LIJ, I can say it, I know what I'm talking about. They were represented by the leader, Tetsuya Naito, as well as Bushi and Sonada. I thought in the build-up to this one that Muto's team would lose because it's his final match in the company and it's wrestling and you go out on your back and everything. That's not what happened, and no one seemed to think that apart from me. So am I just a fool? Instead, yeah, Muto's team won. There was a lot of story in this match. Mainly the story was that Muto was well up for it. He had his working boots on. He was doing Shining Wizards and Dragon Screws and heading up for a moonsault at one point, only for damn Tanahashi to stop him from doing it. And I thought, oh, they're going to come back to that moonsault later on. But no, it's just like a comedy spot where Tanahashi was like, oh, calm down, Grandad. LIJ, not as the heels, but as the de facto heels of the match, took control for a bit. Nice moments between Sonada and Muto, who I believe it's like a mentor protege thing, I think anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments though. And then after that, we had the babyface comeback and Muto getting the final Shining Wizard for the win, but letting Shota Umino get the pinfall instead of him. Kind of maybe a passing of the torch. Next up, a four-way match for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. The champion being Taiji Ishimori and his three challengers being Master Wato, the crowd favorite, the underdog, Hiromu Takahashi, we all know how great he is, and El Desperado, another personal favorite of mine, but someone who over the past few years has really propelled himself up the card in New Japan, it's fair to say. I thought he was going to win this match. I was wrong. We had the story early on of Ishimori taking rests on the ramp, trying to craftily outsmart his opponents. And then in the middle of the match, which was very un-New Japan in my opinion, we got breaking news from backstage. They were like, oh, there's been a backstage fight. And the English announce team were like, what's Kenny Omega done now? I was like, whoa, shots being fired. Tony Khan is fuming right now. The news is that the Noah stable of Congo, which is like Keno's stable, and Nakajima's in there as well, and a few other names as well. They were having an altercation with LIJ backstage. There's photos of it on Twitter now. I guess it's going to lead to some big Well, I was about to say a big multi-man match, but I think they later revealed that they want a series of singles matches, which honestly I'm more in favour of. I think that's going to shine a greater spotlight on men from both promotions, and I think also it could lead to some better matches too. Meanwhile, back in the ring, it's time for the Master Wato push of the century. As I said, this match's underdog suddenly goes crazy. He almost pulled out the win, and then Ishimori pulled the referee out the ring before then attacking him with a chair, but then Wato fired up again and hit, no joke, maybe the best bridging German suplex. Maybe the best one I've ever seen. If you've not seen it, it was amazing. But it wasn't enough to get him the win. Instead, the winner was Hiromu Takahashi, winning his 5th IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. He's one of those guys that even though you could argue he's always on top of the division, like he's never too far away from the belt, I don't get sick of it because he's just that good. Next up, the penultimate match of the night, and many people's most anticipated match of the night as well, the IWGP United States Championship match with the champion Will Ospreay defending against Kenny Omega. Huge entrances for this one and a very unique dynamic with Ospreay being the head of a heel stable but kind of being the babyface, the New Japan figure in this match, whereas Kenny, who made himself kind of a New Japan legend towards the end of his run, departing and kind of betraying the promotion and coming back as the heel despite being a face in AEW right now. It was kind of a weird shades of grey all over the place, but basically as this match developed it was clear that Ospreay was the face and Kenny was the heel. That's because Kenny was doing things like undoing the turnbuckle pad, attacking Ospreay on the outside with a table, like stomping on it and ramming Ospreay's head into it. The center point of this match was a terrifying DDT spot from the top, which saw Ospreay busted wide open. Quite a rarity, I think, in New Japan matches to see so much blood, but it definitely added to the spectacle. And the story of this match was maybe a little bit similar to the Tama Tonga match, with the babyface having to fight back despite being so battered and so broken. But Ospreay did it really well, of course. Kenny went for the dragon suplex off the top, the dragon superplex, I guess. Ospreay landing on his feet as he does. But then also Kenny nailing Kreutz Wrath from the top, a terrifying move. And the point I'm trying to make is that every time Ospreay looked like he was building momentum, Kenny was right back to just smack him down. Kenny Omega, pretty much, he quite dominated this match, to be honest. Certainly more than we were expecting, I will say. Which is why, as I was waiting for Ospreay's comeback, and he had little moments here and there, Kenny started nailing some knees at the V-trigger, the one-winged angel, and won the match. Which, me and Owen, right, thanks to everybody who joined our Twitch reactions, right, we asked before this match, who do you think's going to win? Nearly everyone in the chat said Will Ospreay's going to win. He's the New Japan guy now. One person disagreed, but they didn't say Omega was going to win. They said it was going to be a draw. I don't think one member of our chat guessed that Omega would win. And yet, in what is probably the surprise of the night, he absolutely did. And we'll take that title now, I guess, back to AEW. And of course, given the two men involved, it was an amazing match. Now, that kind of put the main event in a bit of a tricky spot because you had Jay White defending that IWGP World Heavyweight Championship against Kazuchika Okada, trying to follow what was an early match of the year contender. So how did that go? I think it went well because they didn't try to have the same match that Omega and Ospreay had. I think that Okada and White just tried to have their own kind of match, which was kind of your traditional kind of New Japan main event, which was epic, long counters, a slow build, and most importantly, an emotional story at the heart of it, with the shadow of Inoki looming large over everything. So you had various tropes like both men going for each other's finishes and indeed hitting each other's finishes. You had things like Okada trying again and again with the money clip and Jay White fighting out of it. You had Gedo getting involved and Okada having to attack his former mentor to press the advantage. You had all these kind of storyline elements, but I think that the simplest and probably the best story of the match was Okada kind of defending the legacy of Inoki and by extension New Japan. And that's because, of course, many of Inoki's biggest triumphs came against foreign heels, essentially. And Jay White's currently the biggest foreign heel in New Japan, and Okada is the biggest Japanese star. So it just made sense that Okada was going to win this match. And despite a few convincing near falls here and there, I don't know if many of us were in too much doubt. He did so, though, with an amazing combination towards the end, like a big enziguri that Inoki would have been proud of, some kind of weird rolling suplex kind of thing. I think they called it a Cobra Flosion or something. I was like, wow, that was really cool. Tombstone, Rainmaker, like, there was no way that Jay White was kicking out. And it was a worthy cap to what was one of the best matches of the night. For me, it didn't quite pip Ospreay and Omega, but if I had that emotional connection to New Japan that many fans will, then maybe I would have given the edge to this one instead. The post-match was interesting because Okada stood there with the new belt. He's about to do the Rainmaker pose. And Jay White kind of climbs up Okada's body and drags himself to his feet and has some angry it looked words for Okada. This wasn't Jay White turning face, I don't think. I think it was more like, I'll be back, I'll get my revenge, and then crumpling out of the ring. But the show wasn't quite over. As Okada celebrated, his celebrations were interrupted by the man he beat at last year's Wrestle Kingdom, Shingo Takagi, who said, hey, congratulations on winning the belt back and everything, but I want next. And with that, and with a lovely tribute to Inoki by Okada at the very end of the show, that was the end of Wrestle Kingdom, night 1. Night 2 is going to be interesting, because I don't know if that's going to be as big a deal, if they're going to make it as big a deal, or if it'll be like a stage below. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, thank you very much for watching this video. I've been Jack from Cultaholic. Do leave your thoughts and opinions if you saw Wrestle Kingdom in that comment section down below. Stay safe out there, of course. Stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.